Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the academic procession and the Chancellor.
I declare that the 573rd Convocation of McMaster University for the conferring of degrees is now in session.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. I am Dr. Maureen MacDonald, Dean of the Faculty of Science. This afternoon, I have the great pleasure of welcoming all of our graduates and their guests to this convocation ceremony. I would like to start by recognizing and acknowledging we meet today on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. It's very special for me to get an opportunity to open the ceremonies today, as this year is my first year to attend convocation as the Dean of Science. As graduates of the Faculty of Science, you have much to be proud of. You, in a few short hours, and I know you're hoping it will be short, will transition from students to alumni. Like many of our past graduates, I know that the path to today has been filled with both challenges and opportunities, and many lab reports, and that you are anxious to see what lies ahead. As you make this transition, I want to encourage you to reflect and consider the mission statement of the Faculty of Science. That statement says that we want to advance scientific discovery and knowledge and to promote scientific literacy and understanding in our community. I know that each and every one of you have been contributing to us reaching this goal of achieving this mission in many diverse ways while you have been students. And I look forward to hearing about the wonderful things that you will do in the future. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge some of the notable leaders joining me on stage today. Today we have Dr. Suzanne Lebarge, our Chancellor, Dr. Patrick Dean, our President and Vice Chancellor, Dr. David Wilkinson, Provost, Vice President Academic, and today's Master of Ceremonies, as well as several Associate Vice Presidents, Associate and Assistant Deans, Chairs, Directors, faculty members, and honored guests. Before we start the formal program, I would ask all students to please take out their eye clickers and set the frequency to BD. We're going to have one last multiple choice test. I just thought you might want to hear that phrase one more time. In all seriousness, I would ask everyone in the hall to please switch off all electronic devices that may ring or beep during the ceremony. I would like now to call upon our Chancellor, Dr. Suzanne Lebarge, to make her own welcoming remarks.
Welcome, honored guests, staff, faculty, families, friends, and most importantly, graduands. This is an exciting day for all of you who are graduating today, as well as for all those people who have supported you and stood behind you, and in many cases have had a key role in you being here today. You've achieved a great deal to get here, and you should all be very proud of your success and looking forward to what the future might bring. Congratulations, and enjoy the ceremony.
I am Dr. David Wilkinson, Provost and Vice President Academic of the University. I have the great pleasure of being your Master of Ceremonies this afternoon. I would first like to welcome Dr. Patrick Dean, President and Vice Chancellor, to the podium who will be presenting the honorary degree recipient.
Madam Chancellor, by the authority of the Senate of McMaster University, I have the honor to present Bernhard Banaszewski. Bernhard Banaszewski joined McMaster University's faculty in 1955, becoming the Mackay Professor in Mathematics in 1964 and Emeritus Mackay Professor in 1991. A two-time chair of the Department of Mathematics and Statistics and a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, Dr. Banaszewski has been a central figure in establishing the department's international reputation. He is acknowledged as a master of the conceptual method of completing and presenting mathematical work, and he has contributed to subjects including topology, category theory, order, mathematical logic and foundations, and algebra. His 217 scholarly publications have produced more than 1,400 citations. Dr. Banaszewski has been a consistently productive mathematician whose work has appeared in a range of journals, including Archiv der Mathematik, Algebra Universalis, and Order. His work has contributed essential tools to the semantics of computer programming languages and the theory of computation. He was the first to give a comprehensive theory of injectivity and projectivity in arbitrary categories, and he is a leading figure in the mathematical development of lattices. As an active leader in his field, Dr. Banaszewski has been a member of the Associate Committee on Pure and Applied Mathematics, chairman of the Grant Selection Committee for Pure and Applied Mathematics, and a member of the Committee for International Scientific Exchanges, all for the National Research Council of Canada. He served on the selection panel for the Stacey Prize, and he was group chairman for the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, or NSERC, Committee on Grants and Scholarships, as well as chairman of the NSERC Program Evaluation and Audit Committee. Dr. Banaszewski also served as vice president of the Canadian Mathematical Society. Dr. Banaszewski has traveled the world as a visiting professor and researcher. He has held multiple appointments at the University of Cape Town in South Africa, Chapman University in California, and Charles University in Prague. He has also held visiting positions at Shahid Beheshti University in Iran, the University of Coimbra and the University of Lisbon in Portugal, Sogang University in South Korea, and the Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur, among many others. He served for 22 years on the editorial board of Topology and its applications, and continues to serve an ongoing and even longer term on the board of Quaestiones Mathematicae. He was also associate editor of the Canadian Journal of Mathematics for a decade. Dr. Banaszewski is an honorary member of the South African Mathematical Society and has been recognized by the University of Cape Town with an honorary Doctor of Science degree. Madam Chancellor, it is an honor to present to you a long-serving and distinguished member of the McMaster family, a scholar who has helped advance the frontiers of mathematics, and a leader who has helped establish the worldwide credentials of one of our university's cornerstone departments. I ask that you confer upon Bernhard Banaszewski the degree Doctor of Science, honoris causa.
Bernhard Banaszewski, by the authority of McMaster University Senate, I have the great pleasure to confer upon you the degree Doctor of Science, honoris causa in McMaster University with all the rights and privileges pertaining to that degree. Congratulations. We'll get to the sign over here. I would now like to invite Dr. Banaszewski to deliver the Convocation Address. It's all yours.
Madam Chancellor, President Dean, honored guests, graduates, family and friends. Let me start this by explaining to you how I resolved the complicated problem of doing something that I feel utterly and completely incompetent in, namely giving this address. I've given many talks in my life, as you can imagine, but this kind of talk I've never been asked to give, and the ones that I've heard, I don't remember anything to take as guidance. So I had to really think. And my first thought was that I should find a few wise remarks that I could address to the graduates, to have a way of thinking about the achievement that is celebrated this day. And then I discussed this approach with a dear friend who teaches communication at the University of Cape Town. And she said, oh, no, that you can't do. That's completely silly. Your audience will not want to follow these philosophical ruminations that you might get into. What the audience wants is a down-to-earth talk about yourself, about your background, explaining things. For instance, how come that you, with a doctorate, with a supervisor, world-renowned mathematician, a position at a highly regarded university in Germany, how come you wind up at McMaster University? And I thought, well, maybe that is not a bad idea, maybe that is what I should follow, so I accepted her advice. Which was actually not difficult to do, because in principle, I much prefer telling a story to reciting a sermon. Now, the story starts in 1943. The German army has just been defeated at Stalingrad, and that was the moment when you thought that the war was turning, And that was the moment when you might start thinking, what will happen after the war? And so I, being 17 at the time, thought about this and decided if I survive this war, then I will, as soon as possible, emigrate from this country, shed my German identity, never think in German, never look at a German book, give it all up, turn away from it. And the reason for that, I should explain, was that I was growing up in a circle of people who were passionately opposed to the regime of Adolf Hitler, and I, of course, was educated in that spirit. And so that was my idea of dealing with my experience under this regime. So, the war went on. I was drafted into the army in May 1944. The war, as far as I was concerned, ended for me on April 16th, 1945. I became a British prisoner of war. And they kept me like that for quite a while, and I was finally released from that in February 1947. But even at that moment, I couldn't return home because I was obligated to continue the job that I was doing as a prisoner of war, now as a civilian. But eventually, at the end of end of March that year, no, April, sorry, I was back home, and then I could start thinking about my life. And so, as I said, I first wanted to have my education finished before I did anything else. I tried to get into university for the summer semester of that year, beginning of 1st of May. That didn't succeed, but I managed to be admitted the following term. So I started university on the 1st of November, 1947. I finished all the things that I had to do to get my doctorate in July of 1953. That was actually much faster than I had imagined. I thought I would spend at least 6 more months concentrating on my 2 minor subjects, which were theoretical physics and philosophy. But my supervisor, when we discussed this with him, said, no, you can't do that. You have to get your doctorate this term. And then he explained. The department had a vacancy for a junior appointment. The department had decided he should determine who should be appointed, and he had decided that he wanted me to have this job, and for that I had to finish my doctorate that term. So I started then 1st of November, 1953. And then I could concentrate on the idea of leaving the country, which in this particular situation that I was now in meant finding a university position in some other country. There were limitations to that. Besides my native language, German, I could only speak English, and so it was the English-speaking world that I was looking at. Also, there were certain other considerations. I didn't consider to go to Australia or try to go to Australia or New Zealand. That seemed to be terribly far away in those days. Nowadays, one wouldn't think that way, but in those days, one did. And the other place that I definitely didn't want to go to was the United States, because the United States was evolving its own homemade brand of fascism, led by a politician called McCarthy. And if you're leaving your home country because you want to eliminate the memories of a fascist regime, then you don't go to another one, obviously. So I had my choices limited. I used the London Times to find out what positions there were. They ran a column of ads, academic positions in the English-speaking world. And indeed, in January 1955, I come across a little ad that says, McMaster University, Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, is looking for an assistant professor in mathematics. And I thought, hey, that's the kind of thing. I better investigate what kind of a place it is. I had no idea. I didn't know where Hamilton was. I didn't know what McMaster University was. So I made some discreet inquiries, discreet because I didn't want anybody else to know that I was thinking of leaving. So I find out the following interesting information. McMaster, very small university, only 1,600 students, very good science faculty, very ambitious, and generally expected to try to be one of the leading institutions of Canada. So I thought, well, that sounds like a very good idea. The only negative thing that my informant produced was they do have a bad football team. That fortunately had no impact on my decision, so I instantly wrote to McMaster. I got a response, not as quickly as I had hoped, but I did get a response. And I was invited to come to London, England, to meet somebody from McMaster for an interview. So I dutifully go to London, and the person that is there to interview me is Harry Thode. Now, Harry Thode was at that time the principal of what was called Hamilton College. Now, Hamilton College was created as a unit that would take in all the science faculty, all the science departments. The rest of the university was called University College. And I later on, I didn't know that at the time, but I later on learned that Harry Thode was one of the leading scientists of Canada. He was a physical chemist with close connections with nuclear theory. My impression of Harry Thode was enormous. He was a very, very wonderful person. He struck me as a really inspiring leader, and his behavior was sort of very understanding and subdued and low-key. And so I thought, this is a good man to work under. And as we parted, he said, well, this was a very good meeting. Thank you for coming. I have to tell you that I do not make these decisions. There's a process that we go through, and in due course, you will be told the result of the process, which indeed then happened, and again, a little later than I thought, but there it was, an offer from McMaster of an assistant professorship, which, needless to say, I was gratefully and enthusiastically accepting. So the rest is history, you might say. However, there's one footnote to this that was very interesting. Decades later, I discovered what really went on at McMaster at the time when I was initially interacting with it. The vacancy that had come up that was advertised in the Times was due to the fact that a senior member of the department was retiring, so that vacancy was coming. Everybody knew when it was. And so the department itself tried to adjust itself to that and tried to see to it that they had somebody that could take over once the vacancy occurred. And there was a student, honor student, that got his degree here, that had decided to get a doctorate in mathematics at some US university, who was then planning to be finished exactly at the time when this position became available. And he was the one that was earmarked for the post. So actually, when the ad went into the London Times, the position was filled. But Harry so decided that he wanted to see what kind of applications there had been, and then he looked at mine, and he decided he wanted to see me, and then he decided. It was he who decided, absolutely, because he simply created a new position for the Department of Mathematics so that they could appoint me. So it was Harry thought. And I should add before I finish that Harry thought on a couple of further occasions during my time at McMaster took certain initiatives in my favor that made me feel very grateful. So at this moment, I can only say, thank you, Harry Thought. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Dr. Baniszewski, thank you very much for your comments. It may have been a story, but there's so much in that that we can learn from in terms of perseverance, in terms of trying change instead of moving on and looking at broader opportunities. But it's also for me a real pleasure to welcome Dr. Baniszewski, or tie him closer if you want to the McMaster family. It's rare that I get a chance to give an honorary doctorate to somebody who has contributed so much to our university and who has helped make it into the kind of university we've all benefited from today. So again, congratulations, Dr. Baniszewski, and welcome.
Dr. Patrick Dean will now come forward to present the graduates to our Chancellor for admission to their degrees.
Will the graduates please stand? Madam Chancellor, on behalf of the McMaster University Senate, I present to you these candidates in order that you may confer the appropriate degrees upon them, and I bear witness that they are worthy and suitable. May I also request that you confer the appropriate degrees in absentia upon all those candidates who have successfully completed the required course of study, but who are not present.
Graduands, by my authority and that of the McMaster University Senate, I have the great pleasure to admit those before me today and those in absentia to their individual degrees in McMaster University, with all of the rights and privileges pertaining to those degrees. My sincere congratulations to you all. Please be seated.
Graduates, I now ask each of you to join me on stage so that the Chancellor and I may welcome you to the McMaster community of scholars.
Ladies and gentlemen, so that each graduate's name may be heard, it would be appreciated if during the presentation of the graduands, you would hold your collective applause to the end of each degree category. Thank you. Madam Chancellor, may I present to you the following graduates of the degree Doctor of Philosophy. Carmen Carrasquilla. Nicholas Robert Andrejchuk. Dinesh Basker. Tanzina Chowdhury. Rochelle Melanie Kleinberger. Zoe Reeve. Abdulreza Yazadani. Kirill Mayerov. Hossein Taginijad. Yang Tang. Monica Wong. Benjamin Walter Keller. Nikola Miladnikovich. Zara Anjomani. Madam Chancellor, may I present to you the following graduates of the degree Master of Science. Arkash Nayanapa. Michael Zhu. Sean Conley. Stacy Muse. Laura Christina Dainty Patterson. Iman Mohammed Alamer. Jing Chao. Laxman Givmir. Zhao Yue Lin. Jingwei Liu. Kai Yang.
Madam Chancellor, may I present to you the following graduates of the degree Bachelor of Science Honours. Christina Laura Abatalangelo. Alison Christine Abdillah. Abdel Shafi Taleb, Mina Al-Saig, Noor Shafiq Al-Sweeti, Rahim Ali, Rochelle Almeida Knight, Nicole Marie Amaral, Shakria Ameri Mahabadian, Polina Andreevskaya, Teresa Maria Anthony, Aksha Ashad, Kamal Arial, Sarah Awid, Rem Omar Aziz, Stephanie Balado, Gulian Angelo Balisi, Esha Banerjee, Yelena Kristina Banyavcic, Bianca Bantoto, Alina Jade Barnett, Emily Marisa Barafato, Patricia Bauer, Christian Joseph Bellissimo, Adam Bernardo, Monica Bandari, Grace Z. Ying B, Dakota Binkley, Stephanie Black, Chelsea Bodo, Farasdak Bora, Priyanka Santosh Bopadika, Margot Nicole Borish, Joshua Sebastian Braganza, Taylor Nicole Brenton, Sylvie Alama Bronsar, Andrew Brown, Dana Buckingham, Shayla May Burrows, Lauren Beers, David Bisseth, Jae Hyun Byun, Yifei Tsai, Ina Patricia Kanlapan, Crystal Chung Ying Chan, Eva Chang, Kathleen Ilana Charlesworth, Arusha Chowdhury, Bilal Chowdhury, Salah Ahmed Chima, Jeshin Chen, Yo-Yo Chen, Yu Chen Chen, Carla Tia Chidu, Samantha Tyler Chow, Kayon Christie, Wenjie Chu, Claire Ching Lang Chuang, Eunice Hye Chun. Evangeline Joyce Clark Leopard. Julian May Corteza. Matthew Costa Park. Christopher Pedro Couto. Devon Joseph Crawford. Mikhaili Cromwell. Phoebe Chereshnish. Joanna Carol Kunanen. Wayne Cyril Coutinho. Ivana Chvoro. Daniel Paul de Souza. Patrick John Daly. Mariam Davari. Brandon Alwyn Dessar. Amanda DaCosta. Alexander Kyle Dollywall. Priyanka Dano. Kimberly Marianne Diaz. Brittany Donadell. Irene Dua Kessie. Layla El Wafeli. Mohammed Ashraf Elda. Shante Nicole Ellis. Beran Falk Dotan. Merrick Shamsuddin Fala. Michael Stefan Fatsenko. Samantha Fernando. Alicia Ferrin. Sabrina Mariana Fisico. Samuel Augustine Foran. Alec Francis. Dominic Francone. Gregory George Fulton. Vincenzo Fumo. Natalie Galashevich. Cody Brian Gale. Natalie Rose Javasi. Sufanpreet Gotra. Rosie Gill. Connor Gillespie Friesen. Alicia Dorothy Rose Gillis. Devon Glim. Michelle Goldsand. Tristan Michael Goodwill. Anik Gujan. Shakil Ghulam Hussain. Dulani Guraratni. Adi Gunturi. Cindy Guo. Amelia Ann Hadath. Bereket Johannes Haile. Fadihana. Aksa Khanum Hanif. Alexandra K. Hanley. Emily Elizabeth Hartung. Kashfia Hassan. Derek Hastings. Carla Eva Herrera Quijano. Julia Juri Hong. Sarah Sophia Hussain. Deep Inamdar. Aquino Inigo. Kylie Innis. Christiana Boluvatife Isedowo. Umna Akhtar Islam. Lauren Christine Yagus. Richard Jalonen. Sandeep Jaswal. Aisha Javed. Shahera Himali Yayatunga. Shiyu Jin. Hapuka Anna John. Peter Allen James Johnston. Jameen Ju. Harris Tom Joseph. Jovana Jovanovic. Chinlei Huan. Nikita Kalsi. Manpreet Kaur. Alana Kelly. Nabila Tabusam Khan. Manvir Singh Kural. Gina Kim. Susanna Kim. Ryan Henry Kippers. Jonathan Scott Kirby. Jamie Catherine Knoch. Daniil Kapilov. Eric Joseph Koritko. Patricia Kasulis. Adam Kowalczyk. Lucia Maria Krivankova Small. Miriam Andrea Krzyzewska. Scott Eric Lengert. Andres Simos Laraniero. Samuel Paul Lasky. Rachel Lasseline. Michael Peter Lauch. Dominic Laux. Thomas Sperios Lazaro. Jordana Emily Leader. Teresa Leger Bell. Haley Keena Leroux. Chujie Lee. Jennifer Lee. Hang Lian. Linda Liu. Wen Jing Lin, Chen Liu, Yangzi Liu, Stephen Lorenzi, Haiming Luo, Christy Luong, Melanie Lysenka Martin, Si Ma, Elise Isabel McLean, Catherine Ann Elizabeth Mackett, Kamya Mahajan, Vishnavi Mahendran, Mohammed Mahfouz, Farika Mahmood, Yumna Makta, George Jerome Liko Maliwat, Samantha Lynn Maloney, Elim Joy Mann, Kelsey Susan Mann, Shriman Manoharan, Winyesha Sherry Ann Marlowe, Julia Sidney Mascarenas, Hilton Maurer, Carolyn Tess McDermott, Kevin John McDougall, Meredith Isabel McEwen, Carter Lawrence McInnes, Hannah Reed McIsaac, Olivia Maged Milad Anis Mikal, Henry Meng, Diana Merchai, Sylvia Isabel Mills, Stephen Michael Allen Miltenberg, Da Ming, Ismail Mohammed, Ibrahim Mustafa, Mark William Muse, Soren Murad, Tayshawn Murray, Dasha Mikhailova, Monica Nadafi, Ravalia Naidu, Gayatri Nair, Shreya Nair, Humaira Nahuda, Jalis Ahmed Nasir, Alice Nassar, Shalin Chetan Bai Nayak, Shaigan Nejadia, Harvey Nguyen, Nia Niati, George Nikic, Andrew Nicholas Notsera, Victorino Pineda Nodalo, Richard Ross Noel, Michelle Olivia Nutley, Angelico Rafael Obile. Nathania Ofori. Edna Opoku Dapa. Alexander Kenneth Otto. Zulal Oskan. Ajanthan Patski Yanathan. Naz Pakal. Leslie Park. Arya Patel. Hital Patel. Mansi Patel. Jed Kevin Nares Perada. Caitlin Michelle Perry. Lanvin Joseph Estrabilo Pineda. Chrisley Pinto. Andrew Christopher Popley. Thomas Priance. Jaisel Eldo Joseph Punasaril. Jan Shin. Yi Xian Chu. Harife Rabar. Michael Cesar Raditsa. Amanda Lisa Radley. Arnie Reiner. Cole Pearson Reiskums. Hussein Abbas Rasawala. Asitha Surendra Rathnayake Mudiya Anselega. Parul Razdan. Justin Reinhardus. Raja Haris Rizwan. Kelly Moran Rodriguez. Sana Sagri. Saba Sahami. Tara Salih. Kirsten Salvatore. Emily Sanger. Sarah Caitlin Santini. Cassandra Helen Santoni. Sarwa Sahib. Pranesh Satish. Garrett Stephen Schneider. Juliana Francesca Sebastiani. Sukhia Saif. Madeline Serhal. Kritika Seth. Marwan Shahid. Geetika Sharma. Manu Sharma. Chao Shi. Muhammad Munib Shoab. Rachel Lokting Shum. Reda Siddiqui. Harjot Jesse Sidhu. Navan Sidhu. Martin Seek. Joshua Teixeira Silva. Kira Lynn Simone. Amandeep Singh. Gurteg Inder Singh. Isha Singh. Paramweer Singh. Shevani Singh. Supriya Singh. Mathieu Olivier Siu. Ravena Siva Kumar. Lavan Siva Raja. Mallory Sarah Lane Skinner. Tyler Victor Suarez. Loshana Sokalingam. Rita Song. Vandevi Sangeeta Sokar. Stephanie Ann South. Lily Southcott. Mayur Shripathi. Sakathia Sri Ranjan. James Alexander St. Pierre. Marisa Ann Steinbergs. Anna Stotic. Heather Elizabeth Summers. Krishna Surya De Vara. Justin Anita Swan. Vitushi Swarup. Parwinder Tank. Karan Talwar. Yukxing Tan. Sunaira Tariq. Alana Catherine Tedeschi. Edna Linda Teranzade. Michael Thaban. Aaron Thomas. Julia Madison Kathleen Tolton. Nathalie Tomayolo. Charlotte Ann Tusso. Elena Tran. Amanda Tran. Mark Treemstra. Catherine Truong. Carolyn Lee Twibble. Warren Alexander Vegas. Aisha Vijay. Salvatore Giuliano Vivona. Amanda Vibienski. Kiati Walia. Michael Walters. Kun Peng Wang. Christine Marie Wardle. Wadha Wadha. Noreen Waring. Madeline Jane Watkins. Kelsey Watson. Jacqueline Watt. Shintong Wei. Erica Louise Weller. Caitlin Marie West. Amy Rose Wheeler. Edwin Wong. Rochelle Wong. Justin Wu. Yulun Wu. Sylvia Wieska. Eric Zhu Yung Chao. Paul Xie. Aija Yang. Idan Yona. Kaishin Chong Yong. Mauj Yosef. Nayab Zafar. Rimsha Zarin. Michelle Lynn Zadine. Wenling Zhang. Madam Chancellor, may I present to you the following graduates of the degree Bachelor of Science. Andrew Ye Chan Ang. Kamran Ali. Amy Arthur. Michael Avai. Xiaomin Bai. Angelica Ruth Batak. Alicia Jamil Chowdhury. Batul Chiab. Kenneth James Duffy. Charandeep Singh Farmer. Hassan Mohammed Farouk. Terence Fung. Kathleen Elizabeth Gould. Alessia Hall. Benjamin Mark Kingston. Oi K. Kwok. Nicole Lauinger. Yikern Liu. Richard Eric Ritter. Arjun Narayan Sharma. Calvin Mitchell Sims. Clarissa Skorupski. Yuran Song. Guang Yu Sun. Amy Patricia Sutton. Emil Tugala. Ryan Tong. Andy Tran. Xinran Wang. Nicole Marie Woods. Chu Ming Yuan.
So please join me in one more round of applause for all the newest graduates of the class of 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to introduce Ms. Patricia Koussoulis, a graduate of the degree Bachelor of Science Honors in the Life Sciences program, who will be delivering the valedictory address.
If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the precipitate. Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Chancellor, President Dean, Provost, parents, distinguished faculty, graduates, and other wonderful humans who love these incredibly long celebrations. If you're like me, you're in awe that undergrad went by so fast. Congratulations on showing up today, looking fabulous, but most importantly, surviving this incredible experience. I hope to use the next few minutes to share with you what to worry about and what to not worry about. My job is not to eliminate your worries, but instead ensure you're worrying about the right things. Before we get there, it's important to reflect on the moments and memories we've shared together, but also to thank the beautiful souls that have supported us along the way. Parents, you all rock, but not quite as much as the individuals graduating from Earth Sciences. I want to begin with the analogy of a story because that's what I believe university is. Let me make this clear. Not Instagram or Snapchat stories. Not even Facebook stories, because we all know that they just copied Snapchat. But no, instead we begin with a blank canvas and spend the 4 or 5 years constantly painting various images, memories, and experiences. Some are positive and some are negative, but each one teaches you something very important about yourself. I personally learned the most about myself when I took a BuzzFeed quiz on what kind of cookie I am, just as a productive study break. We begin our story by looking back at the hot days, screaming about the glorious number 3.14159, and rocking those sweaty black shirts that had a tint of green on them. We laugh at the fact that most of our friendships came from people who also failed that Chem 1 AO3 midterm and struggled to identify which Dropbox was the correct one to drop our lab report in. Instead of watching psych modules, we questioned the existence of Joe Kim and screamed when we saw that he had a daughter too. We even bonded over the days where we had to pick what our specialization or concentration we were going to be in for level 2. What a scary time, but let's be honest. We felt invincible when we finally made it through our first year. The next part of our story, or the most meat-heavy section, or broccoli filled for all the vegans out there, is regarding being an undergrad student. According to some McMaster dictionary, this means running from ABB to TSH, which is actually extremely stressful, powering through lab reports at 2 a.m., which ends up being our proudest accomplishment on our resume, using Facebook groups instead of TAs for advice. Great job on being academically honest, everybody. We laugh now, but remember that these tasks will no longer have to be a worry for you. You will not have to worry about writing 4 midterms in a week, living in a wild student house, or dealing with integrals that make no sense. Thank goodness for no more Solar, or even worse, having to deal with Mosaic updates. But I guess it'll be a little bittersweet that we can't go to another formaldehyde again. A shout out to all of you for immersing yourself in various opportunities, involvement groups, or bizarre research on nematodes throughout these years. Not sure how we survived all of this. But as we approached our final year, we noticed that our canvas was no longer blank, and that our bank account had a total of $5.35 left in it. We also slowly began to realize that the images we chose to add were a reminder that all our failures and rejections were just incredible learning opportunities, and that having 4 friends is sometimes more beautiful and powerful than having 40. we began to appreciate that science is truly a field that embraces the idea of the unknown. And that's where most of us sitting in this audience are today. We're a bit confused, maybe a little bit nervous about what's next, but maybe for once, this is okay. You came into this faculty and your program not to leave as an expert, but as someone who thrives to continuously learn. You memorized the steps to the scientific method, or did we? And a ridiculous chain of formulas to apply to solving physics or mathematical concepts. Let's just hope that they become useful one day. But it's an important reminder that these academic lessons go beyond the textbook. You need to explore and extract the bigger meaning behind all those assignments and countless readings. Worry about knowing how you learned and what stuck with you, versus being upset that most of our knowledge got deleted from our brains the moment you left Ivor Wynne after that exam was over. But that feeling of walking out of your final exam for the last time, now that's a memory to hold on to. Focus on the people you have met here and how they're going to continue being influential people in your life. And lastly, continue reflecting and ensuring that the scientific puzzles you've solved remain with you in some form or shape or polygon. I think when we get to the stage of the story where we are now, we instantly think that it ends here. However, I'm here to remind you that it begins right now. Today, you have been given another canvas to paint. Go fill it with colors, be curious, and take the tools you've been taught as a science student to make the most out of the unknown chapter that lies ahead. Your story is unique, but not enough when you look at it alone. Each one of you has been shaped by the individuals surrounding us today. Other people's stories have been impacted by your presence. Continue writing your story, but never stop creating with the people around you. Our stories are only stronger when you look at them as a community. And you will always be part of this McMaster community. To the graduating class of 2017, congratulations. You have just finished one small chapter in that storybook that still has many pages to fill. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. May I call upon our president, Dr. Patrick Dean, who will present the Distinguished University Professor Certificates and the President's Award for Teaching and Learning.
From time to time, the Senate of McMaster University awards the title of Distinguished University Professor to exceptional members of faculty whose contributions in scholarship and education are truly outstanding. Madam Chancellor, today, on behalf of the Senate of McMaster University, I have the honor to present the first of two of McMaster's newest Distinguished University Professors, Dr. Michael Brooke. A professor in the Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology, Michael Brooke is one of McMaster's most accomplished and decorated teachers. He won the MSU Teaching Award for the Faculty of Science in 1997 and 2002, and earned the President's Award for Instruction in 2003. He has a strong history of developing new courses that defy disciplinary boundaries, and that approach is reflected in his association with McMaster's School of Interdisciplinary Studies. Dr. Brooke has also guided a remarkable number of young scholars, including more than 130 undergraduate thesis or summer students, 26 master's level students, 27 doctoral candidates, and 32 postdoctoral fellows. The foundation of Dr. Brooke's scholarly work is his expertise in organosilicon, silica, and silicon chemistry. He developed a route to protect gold from surface degradation by passivating nonparticles with a silica layer, a major contribution in biological assays. His collaborative work in this area with Ying-Fu Li, for example, has spawned 10 published papers that have generated more than 1,500 citations. In total, Dr. Brooke, who holds 7 patents, has published nearly 240 peer-reviewed papers with wide-ranging implications for everything from cosmetics to microelectronics to biomaterials. His book, Silicon in Organic, Organometallic, and Polymer Chemistry, is widely considered to be the standard in the field, and he is a pioneer in the development of silicones with new tailored properties. His investigations of the Piers-Rubenstein reaction, a term Dr. Brooke coined, are creating opportunities to target specific molecules for specific needs. And he was also one of the first scientists to explore the interactions between silicones and proteins, leading to the development of biocompatible surfaces and surfaces to which bacteria will not adhere. Dr. Brooke, who has consulted more than 60 times with private sector enterprises, was a Killam Research Fellow, the co-winner of the Synergy Prize for Industrial Collaboration from the Conference Board of Canada, and the recipient of the 2016 Frederick Stanley Kipping Award for Silicone Chemistry from the American Chemical Society. Warmest congratulations to Dr. Brooke.
Thank you so much.
Mike, really well done.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Utterly deserved. Madam Chancellor, on behalf of the Senate of McMaster University, I now have the honor to present the second of McMaster's newest distinguished university professors, Dr. Bruce Gorlin. A professor in the Department of Physics and Astronomy, Bruce Gorlin is the Brockhouse Chair in the Physics of Materials and the director of the Brockhouse Institute for Materials Research. Dr. Gorlin has spent his entire academic career at McMaster building the university's reputation for leadership in condensed matter physics. Specifically, his work focuses on the use of neutron and X-ray scattering to investigate the magnetic ordering of solids and the transitions between one magnetic state and another. He has used these techniques to provide experimental data that have resolved difficult questions concerning phase transitions, questions that had been widely debated in the research community. His most acclaimed work involves the experimental descriptions of a magnetic transition that is expected to occur but never does. In total, Dr. Gorlin's research, published in more than 200 peer-reviewed articles, has made him a highly referenced scholar and has placed him in the top 1% of all award recipients in the NSERC Discovery Grant individual program. Dr. Gorlin is also an innovator of experimental techniques, including bringing the first image furnaces to Canada for the growth and discovery of crystals of new materials. He worked with Oak Ridge National Laboratory to build a Canadian instrument beamline at the new spallation neutron source scattering facility. He is also part of a collaboration creating a small angle neutron scattering instrument at the McMaster nuclear reactor. Dr. Gorlin is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, a former Killam Research Fellow, and the recipient of the Brockhouse Medal from the Canadian Association of Physicists. He is also a Senior Fellow of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. And internationally, he has received the Alfred P. Sloan Fellowship, as well as fellowships in the American Physical Society, the APS, and in the Neutron Scattering Society of America. He served as president of that latter organization from 2009 to 2013. He is the longtime chair of the APS's Lee Osherhoff Richardson Prize Selection Committee and is vice chair-elect of the Canadian Association of Physicists. Congratulations, Dr. Gorlin.
Thank you. Really wonderful. Thank you.
And now turning to the President's Award for Outstanding Contributions to Teaching and Learning, would Professor Chad Harvey please come forward? Popular guy. Around campus, Dr. Harvey has a reputation for being a valued colleague, a beloved teacher, and an inspirational mentor to both his colleagues and his students. His passion and enthusiasm for teaching leads him to go above and beyond to create the best and most illuminating experiences for his students. Whether on a local trip to Cootes Paradise or a cross-border excursion deep into the Kentucky caves, his ability to intertwine classroom learning into field trips and labs has helped students make meaningful connections between theory and the natural world. Dr. Harvey is a core member of the teaching team for the university's award-winning integrated science program, where students learn science through a hands-on, research-based model with self-directed learning opportunities. He was awarded the Ontario University Student Alliance Teaching Award and has twice been nominated for the MSU's Teaching Award. He is dedicated to the well-being and success of his students. Not only does he challenge and inspire them intellectually, he takes the time to provide them with unconditional support. As an ecologist, Dr. Harvey contributes to many projects involving McMaster's green spaces, and he was the driving force behind the community garden. As a member of several communities of practice, he regularly discusses the achievements, challenges, and community associated with the scholarship of teaching and learning at McMaster. He's engaged in national and international collaborations and consults regularly with colleagues within and external to McMaster on the topics of interdisciplinary science and pedagogy. Dr. Harvey's passion for teaching, his ability to inspire his students, and his ongoing dedication to the scholarship of teaching and learning make him an extremely deserving recipient of a 2017 President's Award for Outstanding Contributions to Teaching and Learning. Congratulations, Chad. Very well done. Thank you. Well done. Thank you.
For my own congratulations to Michael, Bruce, and Chad, three colleagues that I've all had the opportunity to work with and rely on for advice and support. May I now call upon the Dean of Science, Dr. Marie MacDonald, who will present the Governor-General's Academic Medal.
Madam Chancellor, McMaster University has been granted 2 academic silver medals by the Governor-General. This medal is awarded annually to the undergraduate student graduating with the highest academic standings. This year, Alexander Dhaliwal is one of 2 recipients of the Governor-General's Academic Medal. I ask that you and all those present join with me to express recognition of his achievement.
Congratulations, Alexander. May I introduce Mr. Don Bridgman, President of the McMaster Alumni Association, who will now deliver the Alumni Association address.
Chancellor Lebarge, Patrick Dean, President Dean, McMaster faculty, fellow alumni, honored guests, and especially members of the McMaster class of 2017. The first time we did this, it was 123 years ago. and there were only 16 of you. The events of commencement, as Convocation was known then, were a little bit different from today's ceremony. In 1894, McMaster's first convocation included a sermon, the complete reading of all graduate theses. We'd be here for a few weeks. Yes, they read them aloud, word for word, and also the conferring of 60 honorary degrees. The black graduation gowns back then were made of alpaca and lined with white satinette, and for the arts grads, and lavender for the graduates from theology. One of the graduates wearing alpaca that day was a young woman named Elizabeth Wells. She later published a description of the ceremony in Canadian Magazine, and in that article she wrote of McMaster's first convocation, "The enthusiasm shown by the students who sat massed in the body of the large assembly showed plainly that they were filled with the spirit of loyalty to their university." Well, I'm not sure if 16 people in alpaca gowns counts as a mass, but the feelings of enthusiasm and pride were likely very valid observations. I hope that you have similar feelings today. I know I did when I graduated. Today, our university is very different from the McMaster Elizabeth Wells knew 123 years ago, and our institutional history and credentials are far more robust. Today, I hope that your McMaster has earned your enthusiasm and loyalty through its service, excellence, leadership, and accomplishment. Just as you have worked hard to earn our pride in you and our loyalty to you as you become the newest members of the Mac alumni family. The McMaster Alumni Association's goal is to take your connection to McMaster beyond the feelings that are so strong today and help make it into a lifelong connection of substance. In your lives as alumni, the association will work to keep you connected. You'll receive our alumni magazine, the e-newsletter, Maroon Mail, and you can be part of the association's digital communities. As our most recent graduates, you can participate in MAC 10, a program designed for you featuring events, career assistance, and mentoring opportunities. Take a few moments after the ceremony to complete our How Maroon Are You quiz, noted on the card you found on your seat today, to have a little fun reflecting on your time at McMaster. It will also lead you to our alumni website, where you can learn more about what being a member of the Alumni Association can do for you. So to the class of 2017, I offer my most sincere congratulations on your academic accomplishments and on your graduation. You should be extremely proud of what you have accomplished. I know I certainly am. Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you, Don. May I invite Dr. Dean back to the podium to deliver his President's Address.
Madam Chancellor, honored guests, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, graduates. You've heard a lot from me on this podium today. I'm sorry you have to hear more, but this is one of the privileges of my job, to say a few words to graduating students just before they leave the university at the culmination of this rite of passage, the Convocation. This is an interesting year for scientists. Over the last year or two, the government has sent the message that Canada is intended to be a country devoted to the pursuit of good science and, as far as possible, to the development of policy based on good evidence. And we all look, as members of that community, for further signs that indeed this is going to be the case. One of the first indications of a new intention on the part of government to move the country back onto a firmer basis of evidence was the restoration, you may remember, of the mandatory long-form census. It was restored, you'll perhaps recall, approximately 18 months ago. At the time, the Honourable Navdeep Bains, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, asserted that Canadians were, and this is a quote from him, reclaiming their right to accurate and reliable information, on the basis of which they would be able to make sound decisions about their personal and national futures. Then last August, with the 2016 census of population complete, Canada's chief statistician, Wayne Smith, pronounced it, this is a quote from him, the best census ever, with an overall response rate of 98.4%, which is probably a sign of our desire to stand up and be counted and to see the return of good evidence to policymaking. A few weeks ago, at the start of May, Statistics Canada released a second series of data derived from the census, this time bearing on the age and sex of the Canadian population. And this report made big news. And the reason it made big news was what the 2016 census had revealed, namely that Canada has, in the last few years, undergone a very significant generational shift. Here's a quote from the report. As a result of the rapid increase in the number of people 65 years of age and older since 2011, 2016 marked the first time that the census enumerated more seniors at 5.9 million than children 14 years of age and younger at 5.8 million. Well, what does this mean? One thing it tells us, obviously, is that the Canadian population is aging, not that we didn't already know that in a crude sense. But the story of the census is about changing proportions. For the first time since Confederation in 1867, the seniors' share of the population now exceeds the children's share, and the group in between, the group into which I think most of our grads today would fall, that is to say 15 to 64-year-olds, is shrinking as a proportion of the total population. Now, I'm an English professor, not a statistician, so I know I have a right to this kind of information and I can make up stories about it, but to be frank, I never know quite what to do with it at the statistical level. The StatsCan report tells me, however, that such knowledge, quote, will be especially helpful for adapting social programs for children, adults, and seniors to the new demographic reality. But I wonder about that. Undoubtedly, it will help us identify and understand the new demographic reality, but what it will mean to adapt to that reality is much more than a statistical question. Implicit in the phrase demographic reality is an assumption that certain consequences must inevitably follow the shift. For example, that funding for health and social programs will now move proportionately to favor the aging and the elderly, even as the working population that must pay for those programs is shrinking. That may be logical, and providing proper care to the elderly, no matter how numerous they are, should be a non-negotiable requirement in a civilized nation. But there are nevertheless vitally important questions that we must still ask about the condition of and the prospects for the younger generation in this scenario. Now, these are especially important questions to ask in 2017 as Canada marks 150 years as a nation. Anniversaries like this provoke retrospection, the backward survey of our past, and they also sometimes provide an opportunity for jingoism and mindless patriotic fervor. And I'm sure in due course we will see plenty of that in Canada when July the 1st rolls around. But so far, this country has taken note of its special year in a fairly muted fashion, recognizing, and this is especially true of university campuses, that while there is much to celebrate in our history, there is also much about which we should be thoughtful and critical, bearing upon our past, for example, the legacy of the residential school system and our obligations under the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, and the future, what kind of country we would like to see this become. On our sesquicentennial, we should look forward, imagining what Canada will become in the next 50 or 100 years. And it's in that context the 2016 census results are for me so thought-provoking. We are being told that this far-reaching and unprecedented generational shift is happening right now as we're running the anniversary flag up the pole. But interestingly, it is a shift that should remind us of our last big national event, the centennial in 1967. And it should remind us of that because that year coincided with another very significant and related generational shift. The middle of the 60s is generally understood to be the end point of the baby boom, that population surge which began in 1946 after the end of the Second World War. And it is the aging members of that generation whose entry into the ranks of seniors over the last few years have given rise to the demographic changes that the 2016 census recently revealed. Now, I'm a baby boomer, and it was my generation that seemed so incomprehensible to our parents that a special term had to be coined to describe the phenomenon that we had provoked. This phrase was the generation gap. And one experienced the generation gap as significant, indeed sometimes very profound differences of opinion about music, politics, personal values, and a host of other topics. Families like my own during that time became cultural battlegrounds. I remember my father, inexplicably to me at least, being plunged into a red-faced fury when he discovered in my elder brother's clothing drawer a pair of blue jeans. And as if that wasn't bad enough, they were jeans onto which some applique flowers had been stitched. And even worse, he discovered alongside those jeans a shirt with, of all things, puffed sleeves. This was the height of 60s fashion, as I think most of you will recall. Now, my own differences with my parents were less sartorial than they were political in nature. But as I've reflected on those times, I've come to understand that those two categories of resistance, resistance through dress and resistance in terms of political debate, were for my generation not really separable. To a degree not since seen in the West, how, or indeed whether, one clothed one's body was contested terrain between the generations, a language through which other, sometimes very deeply divergent views expressed themselves. The generation gap was a term invented by sociologists, building on the theory of generations developed by Karl Mannheim in the 1920s. For Mannheim, a generation was not simply a cohort of people born and achieving maturity between specified years. It was such a cohort, for sure, but also it was one upon which certain major historical events had registered an impact. A generation was, in other words, shaped by its particular historical experience. Mine was, for example, post-war and post-Hiroshima, but definitely not post-nuclear, as we lived in daily apprehension of a nuclear apocalypse. My wife remembers that as a child in school, she was trained to climb under her desk and cover her head in anticipation of an atomic blast. This is a room full of scientists. I don't need to reflect on how effective that would be as a defense. It would be indeed surprising if such practices had not left an indelible mark on the generation for which they were routine and normal. So while the 2016 Canadian population census seems to confirm that we are in the midst of a decisive generational shift, it is obviously far too early to speculate on the qualitative dimensions of whatever gap might open up between your generation and mine. Indeed, it is entirely possible, notwithstanding Mannheim's implication that some sort of generational consciousness must inevitably emerge, that dislocation and discontinuity will not define the ways in which we choose to relate to each other. There will certainly be economic and other consequences of the aging of the Canadian population, most obviously the increasing strain on the healthcare system, to which I've already alluded. Looking into the future, as one does on occasions such as this, and as our nation will do on July the 1st, it is obvious that very significant challenges lie ahead, as the torch passes from one generation to the next. But I am profoundly hopeful about the future because of my faith in all of you. The well-known anthropologist Margaret Mead published in 1970 a serious study of intergenerational relations. The book is called Culture and Commitment, a study of the generation gap, in which she beautifully captured the service which every new generation performs for its society and for humanity at large. The young, she wrote, are free to act on their initiative and can lead their elders in the direction of the unknown. The young must ask the questions that we would never think to ask, and through creativity, curiosity, and innovativeness, find answers that their elders cannot imagine. I've worked in universities for more than 40 years and have always, indeed increasingly, been invigorated by the way in which students have sought to challenge received wisdom and to advance the human, scientific, intellectual, and social project. If there was ever a gap between us, and I suppose following Mannheim that there must always be at least some intergenerational discontinuities, I have strained to hear your voices from the other side of the gap, to learn from what you've had to say and from what you have done. Margaret Mead felt that while the young should be free to act on their initiative, they also needed somehow to re-establish trust with their elders, so that the elders, she said, will be permitted to work with them on the answers. So according to that vision of generational shift then, your future is a project on which we collaborate. My generation providing what knowledge and wisdom we can, but depending on you to surpass us in making this a brighter world. I haven't dwelt very much on the challenges you will face, except for the looming healthcare problem to which I alluded. And I also haven't talked more broadly about the role of my generation in creating some of the problems that you will have to deal with. This is meant to be an upbeat occasion after all, so I've exercised some restraint. But if you need to trust us in order to achieve the solutions you seek, we need to admit our failings and shortcomings and trust to your energy, your creativity, and your positive values. I became an educator 4 decades ago, not just for something to do, but for something I wanted to see created, a better, more just society. The well-being of people, of the planet, of the communities those people comprise has been my preoccupation. And unlike many of my peers, I do not believe that my generation was unique in its idealism, its altruism, and its social conscience. I know from working with many of you that those 3 things are as much, if not more, alive amongst you than they ever were amongst my peers. And that is in its own way a bit of a miracle, given the state of the world that we're in the process of handing over to you. We delight in your success. Graduates, we are in awe of your talent, and we are extraordinarily excited to see where you will take us. My warmest best wishes go with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Dean, for your profound comments. And I can only echo his best wishes and our aspirations for all of you. And as a fellow alumna, I'm looking forward to seeing where you all go from here. Now, I'll also say that this is the year that is 50 years since I graduated from McMaster. I have to say, in those days, we could have us all in one day on campus. A little change from now. But I can tell you a couple of things about that day. One is I have no idea who the chancellor was. I didn't even know who the president was, but people keep reminding me that in actual fact it was Dr. Thode, the gentleman who, yes, had the wisdom to hire our honorary degree recipient today, Dr. Banaszewski, into a role that is typical of what Dr. Thode subsequently did as president to help build this university into what it is today. He had strategy and vision that laid the groundwork for the university that we are all proud to be alumni of. The other thing I realized is I don't remember anything anybody said that day from the stage. And I thought about that because I also realized I don't remember anything anybody said specifically in any of my courses. But I will say that everything I learned provided the foundation of where I am today. The education provided me a base on which to continuously add and keep my knowledge up to date. The comments I got, whether it was from speakers at Convocation, from learning from fellow classmates who were from totally different backgrounds than I was, from the professors who mentored, turned me out, as your valedictorian carefully said, you haven't come out an expert. I don't think there was ever an aspiration to turn us out as experts, but to turn us out as people who could look forward to the world and learn and build upon the experiences that you've had here. And I hope that that holds true for all of you. The other thing I want to say, though, because I think we forget it at times because we always do these things in large numbers, is we're actually here today to celebrate each of you as individuals. You each got your own degree. This is not a team award. You'll get lots of those as you go forward, and very little recognition you'll find as individuals. This represents the work that you have put in over the last few years. And all of you are going to say, and justifiably so, but I couldn't ever have done it alone. And of course not. Without the professors, your friends, your family, the support that that provides, you wouldn't be here. But on the other hand, you had to be prepared to accept that support. You had to be prepared to put in the hard work. You had to be prepared to actually do something to be here. And so, while we have it as a sort of a large ceremony, I want to personally congratulate every single one of you individually, but to wish all of you well as you go forward. Now, I have a couple of housekeeping items to tell you about before we close. Immediately following Convocation, a reception will be held for the science graduates and their guests in the Hamilton Convention Center, Wentworth Room B and C. Flowers that have been delivered for graduates will be available at the coat check in the main lobby. I would ask that you please remain standing at your seats until the academic procession and the graduates have left the hall. Finally, please join now in the singing of our national anthem. After the singing of the anthem, this convocation stands adjourned.